The threat was repeated so often over so many years that it had started to ring hollow, and now Israel has actually done it, striking Iran directly in a bid to destroy its capacity to build nuclear weapons. Jerusalem sees a window of opportunity with Tehran's proxies in Syria, Lebanon and Gaza either gone or debilitated. The Israelis also targeting the senior leadership around Ayatollah Khamenei. What is the ultimate goal? Military superiority or regime change? Iran may be reeling, but it's still fighting back, successfully targeting Israeli cities and its largest oil refinery in Haifa. Will it be a long war ahead? And with Israel lacking the kind of bunker-busting bombs that can reach the underground Fordo nuclear site, will the United States agree to finish the job that Benjamin Netanyahu started? Since Friday, Donald Trump has sent mixed messages, warning Israel against targeting the supreme leader, but cheering the strikes, still billing himself as peacemaker while providing Israel with military intelligence. We'll ask about the only man who can end this unprecedented direct confrontation with a single phone call. Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking just how far Israel and Iran will go. With us, Rina Bassis, international correspondent for Israeli Public Broadcasting, the Israeli Public Broadcasting Corporation, and for the Al Monitor news site. Good to see you.
Good evening.
From Washington, Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Director of the Iran Program at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, a think tank. Thanks for joining us.
To be with you. Thank you.
We'll be joined from Istanbul by journalist Tara Kongerlu, author of The Heartbeat of Iran, who will be joining us shortly, adjunct professor at Georgetown University. And with us as well from Basel, Switzerland, former U.S. State Department official Mark Fitzpatrick, Associate Fellow for Arms Control at the International Institute for Strategic Studies think tank. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You can, by the way, always listen. That's right, listen, like, and subscribe to the France 24 debate, wherever podcasts are streamed. If we looked at the calendar, this was supposed to be the week when world leaders at the G7 in Canada digested news of the latest round of direct nuclear talks between Iran and the United States and look forward to a UN conference on a two-state solution. Israel flipping the script, though, with last Friday's surprise operation. Let's get the latest first with Antonia Kerrigan.
After Israel promised on Monday to make Iran's state TV station disappear, their broadcast was interrupted by an explosion in the studio. This as smoke rose from targets across Tehran on day 4 of an offensive aimed at dismantling the country's nuclear facilities. After Prime Minister Netanyahu announced the Israeli campaign was entering a new phase.
Unlike the criminal regime of Iran, which targets our citizens and comes to kill women and children, we say to the citizens of Tehran, evacuate, and we are on the path to victory.
Israeli targets have included nuclear sites, weapons convoys and missile launch sites. But residential areas have not been spared, and strikes have killed more than 200 people nationwide since Friday. The Iranian Guards also called on residents of Tel Aviv to evacuate. And in Haifa, residents are reeling from 3 nights of missile strikes.
With my daughter, she's 5 years old. She started to cry and very panic. And after that, we go sleep in school because we was very afraid in my home.
For us, it's pretty shocking to see our little neighborhood, peaceful and quiet, so devastated by some missiles that arrive from 3,000 kilometers away from here.
Iran has also targeted oil and gas infrastructure like this refinery in Haifa. Hundreds of missiles and drones have been fired into Israel since Friday, leaving dozens dead and hundreds more injured.
At this point in time, Rina Bassis, were you expecting this, what happened last Friday, the news we all woke up to?
I think we were all a bit surprised, but maybe we should not have been surprised because it came very shortly after the publication of the report by the Agency for Atomic Energy, stating that Iran was in a state of non-compliance, that Iran was enriching much more uranium than it should have been, which was a clear indication that the intentions of Tehran are not peaceful, that they are not striving for a civic or a civil nuclear program, but a military one.
There were supposed to be nuclear talks on the weekend in Oman.
Exactly, on Sunday.
Without, even if there hadn't been this report from the UN's nuclear watchdog, would Israel have seized this window, military strategists saw as a window of opportunity?
From what I hear from Israeli sources, first of all, there was the report, which was, I think, very decisive for the timing, more decisive even maybe from, if you compare it to the 2 days before the Sunday talks. But then there are also reports in Israel, though we don't have the details yet, about all sorts of indications that were gathered in the past few months, I would say, that Tehran is shifting its policy on its nuclear program. What do I mean? When a country wants to become a nuclear power, to have the ability to drop a nuclear bomb, it needs to advance in 3 fields. So one field is, of course, the enrichment of uranium, and then we had this report which shows that they are very advancing in that. The second is to have the means to drop the bomb, and since their air force is almost non-existent, obviously Iran would use ballistic missiles, and we had the demonstration first in April last year and then in October that they can do it. But there is the third element, which is the weaponization, that you need to have the technology to build the bomb, to have the ability to detonate it. And for several years, the belief was in several espionage agencies that Iran is not there yet, that Iran did not start, at least there were no proof that Iran started going in that direction. Israel now suspects that it does, that it started looking in that direction, which is a major, major shift and an existential threat to Israel. So when you compile that with the report and also with the fact that talks are ongoing towards an agreement that, at least for the Israeli government, seems to be a dangerous agreement, then maybe you can understand the timing of this and maybe say that if we were surprised, we should not have been.
Mark Fitzpatrick, you agree?
Well, I think there are many things with which I agree, but some I do not agree with. The factors about Iran's nuclear weapons capability, none of this is new. The report by the IAEA, yes, it was new for the IAEA to determine that Iran was in non-compliance with its safeguards agreement. That report came out after Israel had already decided to bomb Iran. And the report came out on Thursday, and on Monday of last week, Trump and Netanyahu had a conversation in which they talked about the bombing. So it's not anything really to do, it has everything to do with Iran's weaponization capabilities, but it's not that Iran crossed some line and therefore provoked Israel to do this. The timing rather was, I think, based on an effort to stop the talks and crucially, to take advantage of Iran's belief that it wouldn't be attacked while talks were still scheduled. This was a very clever, if I may say so, misinformation move by Israel, and President Trump was complicit in this misinformation.
Complicit in this misinformation, and would you say that he's still complicit? We heard equivocal statements. We're going to be crossing to our correspondent at the G7 summit. But these sort of ambiguous statements about, well, I'd still like to talk to Iran, but they went too far kind of noise.
Well, complicity has many factors and how you slice it. Trump has not assisted Israel at all in any of its offensive operations. He has provided this misinformation that's done. I think Trump is serious that he would like to strike a deal with Iran, but I think he's foolish to think that Iran might do it under such duress.
All right, and right now, no radiation leaking yet from the Natanz site, but the UN's nuclear watchdog says centrifuges may have been damaged at the largest uranium enrichment site in the country. As for the largest underground nuclear facility at Fordo, which you can see on this map here, it has not been hit yet. Reports say, and I'll put it to you, Behnam Ben Taleblu, you need these bunker-busting bombs to reach the underground part at Fordo, and that the United States has them, Israel does not. Will the U.S. finish the job that Israel started?
Well, great to be with you all. Listen, I think that's the million-dollar question right now, which is what will the role of the United States be in this conflict moving forward? And in fact, as much as the Israelis may be having a public or a private line of entreaties to the United States to enter their counter-proliferation campaign, even though right now, just as we continue to watch the targeting, which is this stuff, forgive me for going on a small tangent here, but everything we see in the past 4.5, 5 days in what we have to rightly call the Israel-Iran war is making and breaking history in the Middle East. I mean, this stuff is historic. It reminds me very much, forgive me for having to quote Vladimir Lenin here, but it is the quote about sometimes there are decades where nothing happens and sometimes there are weeks where decades happen. We are less than a week, and everything that we're seeing in terms of this rivalry, this 46-year-old rivalry between the Islamic Republic and Israel, this stuff is historic. I mean, they just struck the state broadcaster, the Israelis did, of the Islamic Republic of Iran, IRIB, while their hosts were on television. There is so much going on here from so many levels. One can slice and dice this. So I just want to get the importance and the historicity of what is happening front and center. But as it gets to the U.S., as much as the Israelis may have that option or that card or that element of their diplomatic approach to try to pull the U.S. in, even as the Israeli targeting is going from counter-proliferation to counter-regime, and then we can begin to even ask, will there be a point in time where they try to make this, in terms of military targeting, a regime change operation? Some of you in your audience may have seen the story over the weekend in the Wall Street Journal, I believe, allegedly quoting an Israeli source. Then there was a separate Iran International story saying the same thing. That
Behnam, I can go further than that, because in the last minutes, the Israeli Prime Minister has told ABC News that, quote, killing Iran's supreme leader would end the conflict. Doesn't sound like they're just after the nuclear program now, does it?
Precisely. That's exactly right. Precisely. In terms of the targeting, in terms of the public messaging, this looks much more like a counter-regime operation that has the potential to be scaled up into a potential regime change conflict. No doubt, the proximate cause is the Islamic Republic of Iran's nuclear program, the weaponization, everything that we've seen the Islamic Republic do. And I know you mentioned the Trump administration. Let me just get to the flip side of it and then get back to this quote, if you don't mind. Forgive me. The flip side is that the Iranians also may have an entreaties to the U.S. too. Traditionally, Iranian military tactics excel during periods of interstate crisis, but are not well sustained during periods of interstate war. Clearly, the Israelis have the conventional military advantage here. So the longer this war actually does go on, the less of an actual diplomatic window there may actually be for the Trump administration to do what they may want to do. And that's why the Iranians are actually increasing the threats. You've seen threats to leave the NPT just today in the parliament. You've seen over the weekend threats to close the Strait of Hormuz. This is a classic Iranian tactic. When you're losing or when you believe you have assets that you need to bail out, you threaten to widen the war to play to the more restrainist impulse. I don't mean that politically, but I mean the fact that America is a distant, more responsible power, to play to them, to have America enter not on one side's behalf, but as a general de-conflictor, de-escalator.
And just very briefly on this point, Behnam, is Benjamin Netanyahu playing Donald Trump?
No, I actually think they have a pretty good conversation with one another, particularly with what Mark just mentioned there, that they may have come to this conclusion to try to, preemptively strike or to potentially get a pale green light to go after the regime's nuclear program on Monday. That correlates with the timeline that Mark laid out. I don't think anybody is being played here other than potentially the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I'll tell you why this matters. The reason the regime stalled, in my view, in the nuclear negotiations is because A, 2025 was a historic year. They needed to get past snapback, which expires this October. But the reason they stalled is they believe Trump was genuinely trying to seek a deal and was willing to expend immense political capital to seek that deal. I think the first part of that is correct. Trump is genuinely trying to seek a deal, but he's not willing to expend significant political capital. And in this sense, Trump may rightly, in my view, I think potentially rightly see military means as creating the space for him to get back to a better position. This is really, in my view, I think if Trump pale green lighted this, and we have to get at the zeitgeist why he may have done this, it is about casting that longer shadow of power, to borrow from George Shultz, across the negotiating table.
Okay, so how much of an
That's the
appetite?
lens in which
How much of an appetite Donald Trump has for military engagement. Let's take a listen to the U.S. president speaking again a short while ago, just before the G7 summit opened.
They should have done that before. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
Well, let's cross to the G7 summit, and France 24 correspondent Wassim Cornet, who's there. Wassim, again, this sort of strategic ambiguity, if you like, out of the mouth of the U.S. president, and the summit is just beginning, and we're already looking at potential failure for a joint communique on de-escalating.
Yeah, allow me to reset the scene here for a second. You know, it's fair to say the Canadians were completely blindsided by this happening. Their goal right here at the G7 summit in Kananaskis was to have the most uncontroversial, uncontentious summit possible to avoid a repeat of what happened the last time they hosted a summit back in 2018. They wanted to avoid rocking the boat. And so they had initially scrapped the plans to make a general joint communique, final statement after the summit. They chose 6 very uncontroversial topics, like quantum technologies and AI, for these 7 leaders to sign off on at the end of the summit. And here we are now talking about a war between Israel and Iran, something the Canadians did not hope for. So really what they're looking for, what we're getting the sense right now, is that the Canadians are trying to see any sort of common ground, any common statement on this particular situation as a victory. And so we're hearing now that this topic will be brought up in several of the bilateral meetings throughout the day. We just heard from the French presidency that Macron did speak to Donald Trump and that they did bring up, among other things, the Israel-Iran war. We're also hearing that this topic will be discussed during the evening session on global security tonight. But again, this outcome for the summit will perhaps be the only thing that will come out of the summit, will perhaps be a joint statement. We've been hearing from pushback from Donald Trump saying that he would not sign off on the draft statement that would commit to safeguarding market stability and say Israel has a right to defend itself. We already know that Japan, for example, had come out pretty forcefully against Israel's actions in Iran, calling them completely unacceptable. So really the sense that we're getting here is that the bar was already low starting this summit. The bar is perhaps even lower as everyone tries to sort of strive for this final statement on this particular very sensitive topic.
Because the reasoning was, Wassim, that having FaceTime with Donald Trump meant that the likes of France's president would be able to gently talk him in the direction of pressuring Israel to dial it down in the Gaza Strip. Of course, that's long forgotten since Friday.
Yeah, it's important to remind everybody that Donald Trump does not like these summits. You know, his predecessors have always seen these summits as sort of an opportunity to improve and expand America's aura across the world on the international stage. Donald Trump sees these summits and meetings as ways to constrain America's power. And so he always felt that whenever he was meeting with other nations, that they would gang up on him during these meetings. And that's why he prefers these bilateral talks. And so again, as I was saying, we are expecting all participating nations to engage with Donald Trump in bilateral talks to discuss several topics like trade, the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, and also now, of course, the latest between Israel and Iran. But again, it's clearly the situation between Israel and Iran is taking the forefront. It is becoming the top headline. It's really a question of whether other topics will be discussed between Donald Trump and other leaders, because again, the Canadians' goal right now is to see a joint statement on Israel and Iran, and getting everybody on board on that particular situation would be a victory for them. And perhaps we're sensing, at least on our end, that perspectives and goals are changing in terms of how the summit will play out over the next 36 hours or so.
Wasim Ghane reporting live from that G7 summit in Western Canada. Many thanks for that live update. And the several newswires quoting the Trump administration is saying Donald Trump put his veto on trying to kill the supreme leader. Since Friday, Israeli strikes repeatedly targeting top figures of the Iranian regime, including now the head of the intelligence service that answers directly to the supreme leader. This is a graphic put up by the Institute for the Study of War, and you can see some of the names on it that have been targeted in operations that remind us of when Hezbollah leadership was targeted last year. Well, as promised, we can go to Istanbul, and journalist Tara Kongulu, author of The Heartbeat of Iran, adjunct professor at Georgetown University. Thanks for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tara, I've been speaking to Iranians in the last 3 days, people who have been speaking to loved ones back home. And off the record, they're all a bit conflicted when it comes to this regime change concept. How strong or weak right now is the regime? And what do Iranians feel about what the ultimate aim should be here?
Great question, and I really appreciate the attention that your question is giving to ordinary Iranian people. Iran, as you and my colleagues on the program know, is a country of 90 million civilians, and I always say not 90 million nuclear heads, and that's a distinction, and that's the story that has not been told. Right now, like yourself, I have been speaking to people inside Iran from different towns, different cities, including Tehran, the capital that is home to nearly 10 million civilians, and they are all extremely concerned. They are terrified, and none of them categorically, despite the socioeconomic, religious backgrounds that they come from, want this war. And that is not because they care about the Islamic regime or the longevity of the government, but because they are afraid of dying. And in the words of a young woman that I spoke with, who's, by the way, PhD exam was canceled, she told me, she said, we protested on the streets over the years, expressing our grievances and anger toward the regime and toward our government that has been faced with brutal crackdowns and stifling. And in those years, the world just watched. No one came to help us. And right now, Iranians do not believe that the United States or Israel really cares for them, for their well-being, for their interest. And they wholeheartedly believe that they're just stuck between a political game, power politics, and quite frankly, the lunacy and rage of two regimes.
Yeah, we saw a lot of outrage over a statement by the Israeli defense minister, yes, tweeting that the residents of Tehran will pay the price, and soon Israel Katz later qualifying that statement. But our correspondent in Tehran telling us that there was an evacuation call for a neighborhood that has 300,000 residents. How do you do it?
Absolutely, it's impossible. I mean, I lived in Tehran for almost 20 years. It is impossible to move from a place to another place of safety, nevertheless, in an effective time manner. I also, again, going back to the incompetence of the Iranian government, there are no shelters. There are no sirens. The Iranian government has over and over again proven that they really don't care about the well-being of their citizens. And what they are doing right now is paddling for their own longevity, for their own existence. So the IDF evacuation orders are quite frankly meaningless. There is no Iranian in the capital and again in other cities, including Isfahan, folks I've been speaking with who don't want to leave the big cities. They all want to go to northern Iran. They want to go to small villages away from cities. So these warnings are in many ways meaningless and defeat the Israeli messaging that we care about civilians, we care about Iranian people. Iranian people very well can see through the realities that are coming out of Israel, but also that of their own government that is failing to protect them and is only escalating this bloodbath.
Iran's Air Force that's out of action, but it's still able to launch missiles that are getting past the Iron Dome in the other direction. Among the casualties, there were 8 in an overnight missile attack on the city of Petah Tikva. We also saw at least 3 killed in the last 24 hours. Rina Basist in at that big refinery, the biggest one in the country, in the northern port of Haifa. Again, proving that Iron Dome works until it doesn't. Israel has been at war now since October of 2023. Is there the stomach for a long conflict?
I think that Israelis for generations have grown with this perception that one day this conflict will arrive. And for many years, the international community kept saying to Israelis, sit tight, there is an agreement, we will stop the Iranians, they won't get the bomb. But with development, it has become, I think, for many Israelis, they just don't believe it. They just don't believe that the international community can stop Iran from getting that bomb. Many of them feel that, yes, Israel is now facing an existential threat. And we see in the last 4 or 5 days that the Iranians are targeting purposely urban areas. I mean, they just point their missiles to Tel Aviv, to Petah Tikva, to Bat Yam, to Rehovot. And yes, the Iron Dome is not 100%. This has never been a secret. I mean, even before these latest escalations, we have seen that. We have seen missile by Houthis that killed people in Tel Aviv, that reached the airport. We know that the Iron Dome is not 100% protection. So if the Iron Dome is not 100% protection, if Iran is really getting closer and closer to a nuclear bomb, and even without the nuclear bomb, all these thousands of ballistic missiles that Iran is willing and firing at Israel, I mean, they're destructive even without the nuclear heads. So Israel is really faced in a certain way with not much choice.
What's the calculus when the Israeli defense minister warns that they're about to hit state television, and then they do hit state television? I mean, that's not a nuclear site. What's the reason for doing it?
I think they how to put it in English? For years, the Israeli military has built a sort of bank of targets. Now, this bank of targets, you have all sorts of categories. So we have seen already that Israel has been targeting scientists to prevent from Iran keeping this know-how of continuing to develop the nuclear bomb, and to rehabilitating the program, because we have seen in the past, for instance, when the program was attacked with cyber, that of course there was some damage, but after some time...
Okay, we understand about the scientists, we understand about, but why state television?
I think it's clear, it's the voice of the regime. So this is means for Israel to stop the propaganda, to stop the regime from claiming that it's protecting its civilians. I think that's the reason.
Mark Fitzpatrick, what's the message sent there?
Yeah, the message that I hear is that this is not about Iran's nuclear program. As you noted, there's so many targets that have nothing to do with the nuclear program. And as for the nuclear program, you noted that Fordo does not seem to have been hit. Israel does not have the bunker busters to obliterate Fordo, but I thought that commandos could do damage to Fordo that would put it out of operation. Natanz has been hit, but doesn't seem to have been so badly hit. And then one other crucial element of Iran's program is the stockpile of highly enriched uranium. Over 400 kilograms of it was stored in cylinders. And I haven't heard anything that about Israel being able to get those cylinders, to break them apart, to destroy them. So, when a conflict was coming, that would have been the very first thing that Iran would have moved. They're easily transportable. So Iran took them somewhere, hid them. And with this stockpile of 60% enriched, highly enriched uranium, that will give Iran a huge head start in rebuilding its nuclear capability. And I expect that they will rebuild it in secret. I don't think that they will continue to be part of the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency monitoring program. So they'll have the highly enriched uranium, enough for 10 weapons. They need to assemble centrifuges and cascades. Many of their scientists have been killed, but I don't think you can decapitate an entire program. The knowledge will still be there. Lesser individuals will step up and carry it forward. You asked earlier, another guest, about the duration of this war. I think this war is going to last for years, because every time Iran reconstitutes the nuclear program, Israel will be compelled to bomb it again in what they blithely call mowing the grass. And it's a recipe for a never-ending war.
And Behnam Ben Taleblu, let me ask you about this, because
could I weigh in on the IRIB assumption as well?
Go ahead.
If I had to venture a guess, IRIB has been sanctioned stateside in the U.S., I think, since at least 2013 under different authorities, as well as different managers and folks who have worked in that institution. This is state TV. At our institution, we put out a monograph on it in 2020, documenting all of the forced confessions, all of the liaising between the IRGC and the MOIS that the state TV has done. And if I had to venture a guess why this organization, which again is not a media organization, France 24 and IRIB are not at all the same sort of thing. So this is not about Israelis targeting media. In my view, this is Israelis doing that third phase of the operation that we discussed in the previous round of questioning, which is not counter-proliferation, for what Mark was saying, but is counter-regime. So targeting elements of the regime's power base. And if I think I had to venture a guess to assess what the Israelis are trying to do in terms of both military strikes and public messaging, is they may be trying to marry that to drive or to maintain that anti-regime sentiment. And even though this may seem counterproductive, because you'd be bombing a country or bombing a position that at the same hand you're trying to support the population in that country, thus far we have seen essentially no rally. Obviously, the regime is trying to generate this rally with the very tragic civilian casualties in population centers like Tehran that have come out. The regime is calling for a full-throated obituaries of, unfortunately, the young children and even the women that were the poor civilian casualties in some of the earlier rounds of Israeli strikes, in a bid to drown out the fact that so many military and security sites were hit that actually were the agents of repression of the Iranian people. I mean, the Iranian police chief, for example, the IRB for decades has been airing tortured and false confessions of even the most deep inside.
But Behnam Ben Taleblu, you heard Tarek Angerlu earlier describing the terror that's felt right now there, and on top of that, we've seen
absolutely right.
We've seen
none of it justifies.
If it's perceived to be if it's perceived to be regime change from the outside, well, we've seen that in Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq. It doesn't end well.
The difference with Libya and Afghanistan and Iraq, and by the way, this is not me defending a foreign war regime change operation. I'm simply trying to explain why Iran is not Libya, Afghanistan, and Iraq, is that you didn't have generations of Iranians protesting first for reform, 1999 and 2009, then a decade of labor strikes, and then ultimately 2017 to present, all of those rounds of protests that went unanswered, both by the government in Iran, they were only met with repression, as well as by external audiences, Western governments.
Yeah, but it's still an external actor. In this case, it's Israel.
Yes, it's still an external. It's still an external actor. But thus far, there has been no rally. So the decades of conventional wisdom in Washington and in the West that even one strike would generate a rally is torn apart when you look at Iranian dissident and diaspora commentary, particularly on social media. No doubt every Iranian is a patriot. Iranians are among the most nationalist people on this planet. No doubt it irks them. No doubt one civilian is too many. One civilian is absolutely too many. And any strike that has a civilian casualty in it is 110% condemnable, full stop, period. However, and this is a very critical however, you have seen the population time and time again hold the regime accountable for this stuff. And if I had to guess, again, to go back to the heart of your question, why is Israel doing this? The Israelis are trying to probably, in my view, drive anti-regime sentiment so that the foreign pressure that they are putting on with military strikes could be married with domestic pressure. And that's why Iran's security apparatus is busy arresting 60 people who are protesting pro-Israel, who are posting pro-Israel things in Isfahan, rather than actually trying to defend the country. The regime has had ideological blinders on for so long. They left the front door open and they were securing the windows. They were cracking down on the hijab against the Mossad infiltration.
Tara Kongerlu.
Thank you very much. Just a few quick points. The Iranian public does not need Israel to behave in such way so that they can rally against the government or empower their resentment toward the regime. The Iranian public and the Iranian people have been resentful of this regime for many years. We've seen them risking their lives on the streets, and therefore there's really no need for these Israeli strikes, whether it be targeted or symbolic, to bring Iranians together. That's number one I wanted to say. Number 2 point on the television, the IRIB, the national television stations have always been quite symbolic psychologically during any form of coup d'etat or major attack, whether it was Iraq, Afghanistan, you mentioned, Libya, Syria. National television stations are quite symbolic. And I think, in my humble opinion, Israel's intention was more of a psychological warfare, that we can attack anywhere that we want, and it doesn't necessarily have to be military sites and command and control centers or residences of officials. And the other bit that I wanted to say, if I may, is one thing that we are really seeing evidently is how sophisticated of an intelligence Israel has and has put together over years. In fact, I believe Benjamin Netanyahu just a few days ago came and said that this plan, this operation, was in the works for months. And for anyone who knows the workings of the isms in Iran would be able to tell you that the Israeli intelligence has infiltrated through the IRGC, Sepah, intelligence, military. They are deep within the Iranian government. They are in the system, and they know exactly what they are doing. But once again, I'm going to repeat, the death tolls are on the rise. More than 406 as of this morning have been killed, close to 1,000 injured. And these are ordinary men, women, children who understand the incompetency and vile nature of their regime, but wholeheartedly do not want bombs and airstrikes over their head from thousands of miles away. The Iranian people, unfortunately, again, historically, have been proven to not trust foreign intervention and others to play with their future and tell them what they deserve. Iranians know what they deserve. And I will end by saying this, that some of the brightest, most talented Iranians are in prison right now. And Iranian people have the right to determine their own future.
Rina Bassist, I want to go back to the point made by Mark Fitzpatrick, that this is going to last years.
It could last for a very long time, and I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, he said that, not years maybe, but he said, he told Israeli citizens already Friday morning that they should prepare themselves for a rather long confrontation without specifying if we are talking about days or weeks or months. I think that's clear, and in a way what was said earlier about the Iranians being able or intending to rehabilitate the nuclear program, even if it's struck significantly, that only proves the point. And the point is that Iran is interested in getting military nuclear capabilities. That's the point. That's the end point. So will it take 1 month for them to get there? Will it take 2 months for them to get there? I heard some analysts saying, okay, but you know, if Israel would not have struck, it would have been a matter of 2 years.
So
2 years is nothing. 2 years,
me,
it's not even our children or our grandchildren.
But let me ask you, because you have the danger, obviously, of Iran having the bomb is you have people who are messianic. But there are people now who are messianic inside the cabinet of Benjamin Netanyahu as well. Israel already has the bomb. Just looking at this from the outside, is there a double standard?
I don't think so, because you have on one hand the Israeli government. You have to look at what has been done, and Israel has been targeting military targets. And then you have on the other hand, and Israel is facing an existential threat. And then on the other hand, you have a country that is a dictatorship. The dictatorship itself is putting, and that was explained well, I think, is putting its own people in danger, but Iran itself is not in an existential threat. Israel is not there. Israel is incapable of destroying Iran. It's an enormous country. We are not talking about an existential threat for Iran, as terrible as it is that people are dying. That I'm not contesting, of course not. It's terrible. So I think the two situations are just not comparable.
Tara Kangorlu?
I'm sorry, I will say that Israel is very capable of destroying Iran, again, distinction, and that would affect the Iranian people. The Iranian regime have as their money stashed away in various countries, quite frankly, in Europe as well, in Asian countries, in the Gulf. They can leave in a second. It's the Iranian people who are going to bear the brunt of what Israel is capable of doing with the backing of the United States. There is no more powerful military in the world than that of the United States. And at any moment, we can see tides change and Israel getting that support. And its impact, again, would be felt by millions of Iranians, because the Iranian regime has a plan B, the same way that Bashar al-Assad and his cronies did, as any other dictators that we have seen around the world. And I think we need to continue to humanize countries that are affected by war and conflict, rather than numbers and focusing on the behavior of the regime, because they really have brought this upon themselves, and most of them know what's coming.
Mark Fitzpatrick, again, we're in a world where there seems to be more and more zealots. How dangerous is this moment?
Well, I think this is a very dangerous moment, but not necessarily because the world is full of zealots, although that's part of it. You know, this push for regime change, I think we're all agreed now that this is Netanyahu's aim. It rests on two huge gambles. Okay, maybe not everybody. Two huge gambles, right? One is that regime change can be fostered from outside the country. I thought we learned in the debacle of the Iraq War that you can't impose regime change on a country. I hear Benham's reasons why he thinks Iran might be different, but it's still a huge gamble to think that you can change a regime from the outside. The second huge gamble we haven't talked about yet is that, okay, supposing there is a new government in Iran, and the gamble there is that this new government would not want that nuclear capability. And, you know, every Iranian that I talk to in workshops around the world and so forth, they say that's false. Moderate Iranians feel the same need for deterrence. They call it deterrence, not an effort to attack Israel, but to defend against Israel or anyone else who might have the bomb. So I think the regime change idea is hugely dangerous. There are many other dangers here. And if I may say one other thing.
Very briefly, because we're out of time.
Can Trump change everything with one phone call? No. He has no power over Netanyahu. He has proven that. He couldn't get Netanyahu to stop the bombing. And even if he were persuaded to call him and ask him to call a ceasefire, I just don't think Trump has that much power.
All right, I can see, Rina, that you have more to say. Unfortunately, we're out of time. The clock has caught up with us. Rina Bassist, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Tara Kangarloo for being with us from Istanbul, Behnam Ben Taleblu in Washington, Mark Fitzpatrick in Basel, Switzerland. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.